And so now we're back with part two. Maybe taking a coffee between those would have been a good move. Anyway, so now with all those sort of input output processes, performance and control, and all the various diagrams, and even the methodologies before that under our belts, the rest of this is definitely things to think about in this stage. And one of them is scalability. And so I know that um, certainly in the earlier stages of this kind of stuff, some people they build an application and run great on their little laptop or whatever, but it's not particularly scalable as you get to 2, 3, 4, 10 concurrent users, or maybe the amount of data vastly starts to outgrow the space or even the performance of the system. So what you're the whole point, honestly, behind cloud computing is actually scalability, and trying to basically work out what is actually the future needs of the actual system, and making sure it can actually go and adapt to that. One of the applications I was responsible for, it went from basically 100 users going up to probably about 10,000. And it was a pretty big deal for us to make sure that the application itself was scalable, that it could grow with use. And that's what scalability is about. Um, Also, with any system, you want to look at the total cost of ownership. I'm sure you're aware. In fact, I'm aware. I bought a car for $6,000. Was that the total cost of the car? Absolutely not. Of course, I had to sink in quite a few thousand into it. I got to pay my insurance on it. I got to pay the gas. If I actually had to pay for parking, which I actually do in some campuses, there is a greater cost to me actually having the car, and that's the same deal with these systems. Now we actually do have a whole little section coming up on that, so that's more actually in the development strategies chapter. But it's still important at this stage to try to figure out what is the total cost of ownership of the actual system as much as you can. Again, we'll talk more about that later. And then we get into the sort of fact finding stage where basically now we got to go off and find actually questions, because we, especially systems analysts, probably don't know. We don't know what the benefits really are of the system. Someone's just telling us to do it. We don't really know what businesses are going to be supported by the current system. You really should have a good grip on this, because right now everybody will think that their stuff's the most important. Your job is to try and figure out, or was either trying to figure out what is the most important, or have a committee or something getting together and talking about it. And so they're talking here about a fact-finding plan, definitely knowing the who, what, W5, right? Who, what, where, when, why, and how is a good deal to a good starting place. And then after that, this is a really blown up version, the Zachman framework. I actually had to learn this in my master's, in my what was the course now? Wasn't software engineering. It was, I can't even remember it. The point was, it was enterprise architecture. That's right, the enterprise architecture class. So you'll notice that it does still have the W5. It also has got sort of a left axis here, because not every question, like how, for example, how will have a different answer if you're just looking at the scope, if you're just looking at the model or the system or the technology. And so you're not going to get asked too much in this course about it, but it is something to think about if you're going to go get interviewed, to maybe, like, bone up on this a little bit. I'm sure there's some cool videos. I might even try to find one actually on this framework, because I'd like to be reminded about it. Then when it comes to interviews, first thing you need to do is, who are the ones you should interview? And then what are you going to do in the interview? What's the objectives? What's going to be the agenda? Figure out your questions, then get ready. Don't just go in there blank. Make sure that you're ready, because if you're interviewing an upper management, for example, their time is super valuable and you probably won't even get all the time you need. So make sure that you're ready. Then you can basically conduct the interview, document, and then this evaluate is find out, how did the interview go? How was it? Did it work? Did it not work? What could you have done better? And so they kind of like go through those steps with those. And then let's get just through all those. I will say that no matter how cool you are, you're going to have unsuccessful interviews. For example, you might have that manager that just has no time to talk to you because their time is too important. Or you're dealing with someone who actually is against the whole project in the first place. Right? Why can't we just do things the old way? You get people that will claim to know more than they actually know, and you get the requisite BSers there. So be ready for that kind of stuff. You probably won't be successful all the time. And then other things you can do besides talking to people, you can check to see what's the documentation out there for the existing either system or the existing process. There probably is some, but don't be disappointed if most of the documentation is in people's heads. Another thing is to watch people. Watch people. Say, hey, you know, how are they currently doing their job? And by the way, don't just show up. You should probably let them know that you're coming. An interesting effect right there, Hawthorne effect, is people actually perform a bit differently when you're watching them anyway. And by the way, interesting enough, this actually kind of happens now almost automatically with some stuff, right? Like Netflix, for example, they're totally watching our behavior. Amazon's watching our behavior. But this is more, you know, the workplace thing where you're actually watching people do their stuff. You can send out surveys and you can send out questionnaires. When you're doing this, designing the questionnaires, lots of good stuff here. I'm going to tell you an overarching one is having as few flex fields as possible would be great. You know, those open text boxes. Try to have at least a few restricted or closed questions like a true or false in there, or a strongly agree to strongly disagree, or, you know, which of these are important, and you have these things listed out. You know, you want to have something kind of restricted. This is actually a pretty good balance here. But you don't want to eliminate completely all of your free text, but you can get a lot of good data here if you can kind of constrain it. And, you know, sure, they're going to talk about interviews versus questionnaires. Obviously, questionnaires you can pump out and get a whole bunch of responses, but you might not get as much of quality with interviews. You're going to want to basically do a balance of the two. And then they talk here about brainstorming as well. And you got to remember with brainstorm, no such thing as stupid answers. So you got to basically be, they'll take time as well. And then here's a sampling where you basically figure out, you know, who's going to get your questionnaires, who are you going to interview, and so on. Okay, so once you got all that, you're going to want to start recording all this stuff. And I know that some places we use Confluence, for example, or maybe SharePoint. I don't really know SharePoint, but some way to document. You don't want it just sitting in a Word document on someone's computer, right? You want to basically have this as transparent as possible and record what's actually going on. Here they bring up some productivity software, which is just a fancy word of saying like Office. Office is an example productivity software. And then as far as trying to control some of this stuff, and along with that, I should say, we've got graphical stuff too. And then there's also personal data management software, which, believe it or not, Outlook is one of those, right? Where you're basically trying to track your calendar, maybe schedules, meetings through the calendar. To-do lists. I used to actually get work assigned to me through to-do lists, where someone would actually create one and then share that with me. And that's how I actually knew. But there's much better ones than this. Jira is a good example, again, of something like that. All right, and then when it comes to project data management, and not the project management, I'd say. Anyway, there's other software. There's OneNote, of course. I was just introduced to Notability or something like that, and I think Evernote. I mean, there's other ways to sort of get all that in there as well. So now we're about to go in the next chapter to logical modeling. This is where we're trying to keep it at a higher abstract level, and then we'll eventually go to more design documents, the kinds that you probably saw in previous courses. So that's what we got for this part 2, and we will basically see. I'll see you there, basically.